up, and welcome to another episode of ASAP, the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. I am one of your hosts, T, joined as always by my sister Michelee. What's going on, sis?
Not too much this morning. This afternoon. I know I did it again. Shoot, but
It's so much.
but yeah,
It's
I'm
so
doing
much
pretty
crap
good.
going on in the world, man. It's so
Right,
much
right.
going on right now. Like, we had a cool little show yesterday. It was dope. But right now, I really don't even know what to say about what's happening, especially when it comes to the state of the diaspora right now. And
Yeah,
like, African unity is all about unity across the African diaspora. And it just seems like people are creating issues just for the sake of creating issues. And,
yeah.
it's disturbing me, especially based on, what it is that I do and what I'm about and what I'm promoting and what, we have been building toward and promoting. And it's
Right.
just, I just, I'm at a place. And so we're going to talk about it today. So you doing all right though, overall?
Yeah, I am actually. I'm doing right. I'm doing pretty well. Like you said, it is just so much going on. Like the conversations going on. You can't engage in all of them. You just go crazy. But it's just
Right.
like with politics, with just everything. But we just gotta enjoy life as we can. I've been, indulging in my self-care little rituals and stuff. So I'm good. I'm
And that's
enjoying life.
necessary. It's especially necessary because I've heard, especially with everything that's going on with the injustices that are happening in America, I heard like there's an activist like depression. Like
Hmm.
there's a certain curve that you hit of, constantly fighting and constantly advocating, and you feel like you're not getting the support that you need and people aren't backing you at a certain point and you just get exhausted, right? And so
Right.
self-care in the midst of this work is definitely important. So, people take care of yourselves, and sometimes you got to pull back and tune out and watch, a cartoon, or just watch something that is
Right.
not about anything, right? Just to
Right.
give yourself a palate cleanser in between, you know, disruptions. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that's our check-in, just to make sure that we both are doing okay, and that,
Yeah.
we encourage the people out there to, if you're in this fight, if you're interested in getting in it, it doesn't always have to be serious. You know what I mean? You can smile, you can joke around with your peoples, and still be, for the cause. It don't have to always be, a mug on your face. So we
Right.
just want to
Because I
encourage you
enjoy
guys with that.
I make sure I enjoy life. I'm laughing all day. Like I
Right.
love watching funny videos. I like,
Mhm.
I play games. you know.
Yep.
You gotta enjoy. I was telling a friend who she was saying she's going through a little, depression. And I'm like, I like to read a lot of things, for
Yeah.
like history related or, a lot of like nonfiction stuff, but I've also um been like getting a lot of like romance novels or something on my Kindle or something, like
Right.
just kind of
Yeah.
escape this reality for a minute. You just
It's so
gotta,
necessary.
yeah, for real. It really is. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, because I know I wasn't even feeling my feelings at the beginning of this thing. Like when those things started happening back to back with the Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd thing started happening, I really started to feel like it was people reaching out to me that made me realize that I was feeling a certain way about it. And I was like, man, you know what? I am not okay. And just
right.
being okay with saying that I'm not okay was a big step in me getting to that point. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, we have a lot to talk about today. So, we're going to go ahead and
So
get
much.
into it.
We got
So much
so
to
much.
talk about. So,
Yeah.
we were having this conversation about, again, the Wakandanization of Africa, right? So the whole
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther conversation and how African Americans felt about it, how people in the diaspora felt about it, and how, our brothers and sisters on the continent felt about it, as well as Black is King. And this
Mm-hmm.
conversation about, I heard this come from some African people, and they were saying that they felt like Beyonce in Black is King was culturally appropriating African culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken aback by the concept of that, because we are of African descent and we know the history of, our displacement,
Right.
and the fact that we were forced to not speak our own language, to
Mm-hmm.
lose certain aspects of our culture. And in certain elements, we, like in maroon societies where we would, escape from enslavement and fortify ourselves and keep a good hold onto that culture, right? So we were able in those situations
Mm-hmm.
to still maintain a lot of our original African culture and even mix it in with the other ethnicities of African peoples that were enslaved in the same, vicinity. So
Right.
those people, even more so than the African Americans, who we were surrounded and engulfed by white people, right? Because even in the islands off the coast of the US that we spoke about yesterday, they were
Mm-hmm.
able to keep certain aspects of the culture that we in the
Right.
mainland who were enslaved were not able to keep. We weren't able to keep practices. We weren't able to keep languages. We weren't able to,
Mhm.
because they were always watching us. And it was
Exactly.
only like within the context of the church, which why so many Black people went to the church, because the church was like our sacred place to even maintain any type of secrecy and coding. And we use those things to make sure that we kept anything that was just
Right.
ours, right? So
Exactly.
the thought of somebody saying that my love for Africa and my wanting to reconnect with what has been stolen is cultural appropriation is just, hurtful and disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have the conversation about cultural appropriation, usually it's like the Kardashians and the Jenners who want
Right.
to
Wearing
take
braids.
take Black aesthetics and then they make money off of it, when Black people have been told that we can't get hired for doing the same thing, right?
Right.
We can't, a Black woman who has just a natural shape isn't able to wear the professional clothes that the same woman wearing the exact same outfit who just doesn't have curves can get away with wearing at work. But this woman, because she has curves, can't wear the same outfit. And
Right.
that type of, discrimination, I understand fully that conversation of cultural appropriation, them wanting to have lips after being demonized for years about our thick lips. Like you said,
Right.
the hairstyles, people changing the tone of their skin using bronzer when we
Mm-hmm.
are ridiculed for our dark skin usually. And so them monetizing our what we have been kept out of opportunities for. That is
Right.
cultural appropriation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to, like, from your perspective, on both ends of, hearing that Africans are saying African Americans or just Africans in the diaspora are culturally appropriating African culture. How do you feel about that? And then your other vision of cultural appropriation in the sense of when the term was created.
Yeah, I mean, we feel the exact same way about that. Because, you and I, along with a lot of our peers even, just have share like a love for Africa and African people and want to reconnect with it. The fact that it was stolen from us, it wasn't a choice. it wasn't, it wasn't like something that we chose to do. We don't even know. It's like a hard journey to even find out, and we won't even be 100% sure because of the history that we've been through. We've been literally, like we talked about before, like breeded like animals, and so you have it's basically impossible for most of us to even link back to one specific
Right.
culture, or ethnic group from the continent. So it is like it's a whole journey for us to even want to reconnect, because what we've been educated on about Africa and African people, African culture, is that it's all bad and evil. And so it's like it took a lot to even get to this level of wanting, of appreciating it for what it is. And I can say from my experience living on the continent and traveling, I've been to 11 or 12 different African countries by now. Most of them I visited multiple times. Like it could have been a lot more, but I've been to Ghana, 4 times. I've been to, Kenya about 3 or 4 times, and, from east to west, north to south, and lived in a couple too. And what the message that I get, or like, like from Africans who are from there, from those different places, I tend to like, they tend to make comments to me like, like, wow, you want to be here, like, you choosing to be here, because when I visit, or like I've lived in different places, I'm not trying to live, like with all the luxuries. I'm not trying to go over there and live above people. I specifically choose to like live amongst the people and socialize, with the native people there, and like really learn their culture. And I think that is a problem though with some people. I think, from other people's experiences, maybe you get Americans or Europeans, African Americans, African Europeans, or, other people who, who have lived outside of Africa, and they go back, and some people might have like an elitist, attitude or something, but for me, that's totally not my experience. And I tend to like, it seems like, and I've been told that I even like appreciate their cultures more than some of them do, because I find like most people I know, that I run into, usually around my age or probably a little younger sometimes, they are like trying to escape. Like they're trying to get to America. And I'm like, we could trade passports right now, because and it tends to be like, well, everything is not perfect here. And I'm like, well, everything is not perfect there. So, we just got to build this bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
I
like,
mean,
it's kind of.
I love the fact that you just said bridge. So we talked about bridging the gap, and we created a new, meaning of gap, meaning that global African perspective, which is what we are trying to develop. And it's still in the works, right? It's still something that definitely needs to be, pushed in our education and in our self-education. But I wanted to talk about, that aspect of, I don't want to get away from the way people really feel, right? So I know a lot of African born people who have immigrated to the United States, right, with their parents, and in their childhood, maybe through elementary school or middle school and even high school, they may have been ridiculed by young African Americans who, make fun of their accent or make fun of their names or say ignorant things like African booty scratcher, right?
Right.
And so we know that these things happen, but I want to, and I don't want to take away from that experience, that real experience of, the way that feels as a person who immigrated here, and you see people that look like you, and then they're the ones that are ridiculing you. And I just wanted to make sure that people understand that, children are, brutally honest and cruel, and aren't always educated to the point where they know what they're talking about. And it's even worse here in the US when we don't learn anything about Africa until, the slave trade is about to be brought up. And so we don't know much about why we should be proud of that, or what we're ridiculing is how ignorant it is. And people take those experiences. You know how it is. You take your early life experiences and you carry those with you. So as somebody who was an African immigrant, and they grow up seeing most of the African Americans around them ridiculing them, and then it becomes popular and they feel like, oh, now you want to embrace Africa, now that it's cool, but you ridiculed me, so they feel a certain way about it. So I want to
and their feelings are valid, like no, in no way are we going to dismiss people's actual experiences, and because those things hurt. There are a lot of things that stick with us from our childhood. Like a lot of people, I know people, adults, very grown people with their own children now, who are still hurting and showing signs of the trauma that they experienced as children, being talked about for their skin tone, for their hair texture, their body type, everything. So we know that this stuff sticks with you. But it is. But is it when it comes to us? Because a lot of times, when a lot of African immigrants will come to America, when they're very young, some of them, depending on which area they came to, they will go to schools, that is majority African Americans. I think, sometimes, I guess that's the people that I know. I don't know. They might be in like more of a mixed, population in their school, but I feel that it's because of their, it's the proximity, or, like, because they experience these things with us, that it's like, these feelings are now directed towards us, because I mean, that was their experience.
It's like a chicken and egg thing, because I have also run into African immigrants. Like, most of my experiences with people of African descent have been positive. And when I say people of African descent, I mean everybody in the diaspora. Me communing with African Americans, me communing with people from the Caribbean, me communing with Afro Latinos, me communing with Africans. But that's my approach to them.
Right.
Because I want to be involved. I want to know more. I am African American, so of course I easily blend with the people that I grew up with.
Right.
But when even in high school and things like that, I would challenge people who were overly, Black and overly American, and be like, question some of these things, and just, talk to a lot of my peers who would fall into that trap of, ignorantly criticizing and ridiculing, African names, because we will accommodate and learn how to pronounce Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Right. But we won't go out of our way and learn how to say Nyong'o the right way.
Right.
You got people calling Lupita all different types of things in her last name, right? But Nyong'o, you just won't, but you'll learn how to say Schwarzenegger and all these other crazy Eastern European names that aren't easy to pronounce. Like, those are accepted, but it all is about where we are, the confines of, the United States, and how our education system is built up in that way. So but I was talking about the chicken or the egg, because I've also seen African immigrants tell African Americans that they're not African. Right. Even African Americans who have been pro-Black, who have been Pan-Africanists, who have been, the Black nationalist type people, and who buy into that. I've heard from continental Africans who are cynical and say, no, that's not a thing, that won't happen. Right. Ignoring the people on the continent who have even embraced that as well. And so what can happen is, by virtue of, an African immigrant meeting an ignorant African American and having one bad experience, or an African American meeting an African immigrant and having one bad experience, then you paint and wash over everybody that, oh, they don't like us. Right.
Because
those ideas come from.
Exactly. Because I mean, honestly, in this is in my adulthood, because, and honestly, growing up, I didn't I wasn't aware of anyone, no one at least was flaunting their flags, waving their flags if they were from somewhere else. It was they might have already been assimilated into the culture. I don't know. I wasn't aware. So it was more so in my adulthood when I am interested myself in learning more about African culture and like identifying myself, trying to figure out my own identity and reconnecting with my heritage because it wasn't encouraged, within the family. Like ain't nobody talking about we African,
Right.
this and that. Well, I remember I had like two cousins, I think. And we did like African drum and dance and stuff like that. And so that was really my first time. Now that I'm thinking about it, and I was kind of young then, but it kind of got me into it. And I'm now, when I would run into people, like I guess around the time I was in college, and I'm in Atlanta, and I'm meeting people from all over the country, and some people's experiences with other people. Maybe they had grown up with people from Nigeria, Ghana, or whatever, who had come to America, and their opinions are like, girl, them Africans don't like us, or
Right.
something like that. And so I had never heard that. I never experienced it. But again, I never, personally been in touch with, with a lot of people who had moved to America or, first, second generation or whatever. So,
Mhm.
that wasn't my experience. I didn't have knowledge of that. But I do, I don't know. I've heard a lot of things since I've been coming into this. But yeah, I mean, we see with like Afro punk. Remember, with Afro punk, it was a girl. She was like, I think she was British. She was like Nigerian from the UK. I don't know if she was born in the UK or whatever, but she
Right.
wrote a post talking about with people, doing the dots on their face and everything. Uh, from on Afropunk, during the Afropunk events and stuff, and she said it was cultural appropriation, and that was the first time I ever heard about it. And
Mm.
somebody else referencing African Americans wearing dashikis or something like that, and so that's when I really first started hearing that conversation. And I had been traveling to Africa at that point, so yeah, it was a little interesting.
Yeah, it's always interesting how these conversations flow, and there is history behind all of it, right? And I
Mhm.
remember just being in childhood hearing that Africans don't like African Americans and these people don't like such and such. And so it becomes so permeated in the conversation that you don't even remember the source of the information, which is why it was so important for me to do something about it when I really got into the point of, okay, where is this? Like, we just kind of passively accepted that Africans don't like us.
Right,
And when I
right.
started being friends with a lot of people from Africa, I was like, and they just believe that we don't like them. Like, they're questioning me why I'm even hanging out with them and why I'm asking them
Yeah,
questions about their language and their culture. And, me
yeah.
explaining them what I had lost and what I wanted to gain back, because
Mm,
they came around eventually to understand that, but they didn't really understand why I was even interested, like you alluded to before.
hmm.
And so we just don't question who is educating us and why it's being done. Like, these things are happening intentionally to keep us isolated from one another. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's very important for us to acknowledge, okay, who is the source of this information? And should I, like we talked about yesterday, being, having a healthy distrust of new information and
Hmm.
always analyzing it and questioning it and making sure that it lines up and, checking the source and understanding, what propaganda or what narrative or what agenda is trying to be pushed on you or your people. So it's just very interesting about cultural appropriation, because there is a movement to Africa, right? Like you said, and I see a lot of, and I try to make this apparent to African Americans, because
Hmm.
we all know about, we know where we come from, right? And we are in a Eurocentric society.
Right.
And so a lot of the times when you're educated in a system, even if you can't stand it, even if you feel oppressed by it, you internalize it and
Right.
you start to define success or ways to function based in the system that you're in, because that's
Mm-hmm.
all that you know. So sometimes, even with the best of intentions, we can have a colonial mindset, right? So
Right.
if we go to Africa and we are participating in the year of return and we're doing this and that, and we're not like you and me, who we want to go to Africa, but we want to keep our luxuries and our US Western amenities. So we
Right.
don't want to go to Africa and be with the people who don't have those things. We want to stay on the resort. And I hate
Right.
resort experiences because
I
you're
don't go
not
to
getting
resorts,
the full
period.
vibe. Right. You're not getting the full vibe if you're on that all-inclusive resort type of experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you feel like you've done something because you went, but
Yeah.
you go, but is your contribution going to aid the people? And
So,
sometimes we can passively be like imperialists like that.
right. What do you think? Like, can you even think to what sparked this interest that you have? Because I'm trying to think, like, I think it was, now that I'm thinking back to my cousins who, I would see them and experience like the with the drum classes, the dance classes and stuff like that. That was the only really, only real time that I experienced that like firsthand, I guess. And they weren't from the continent, but they were interested in as well. And so I think like amongst my peers, I don't remember anyone really talking about it, but I've always been interested even in like learning different languages, and
Mhm.
it didn't only have to be, from Africa, but of course I was drawn towards it because I'm trying to figure out like my identity, and I'm learning in school, and I'm like, well, why aren't they telling us certain things? They're like, it got to be more to this because this just can't be it. And I don't remember though a lot of my peers questioning the same thing, and I would be more sensitive to like see someone picking on somebody, like, I mean, I'm from LA, right? We have a lot of people, a lot of immigrants there, from different countries, mostly like Spanish speaking countries, right? My
Mhm.
best friend was Mexican, and it was just like, I would see people or experience a lot of people like picking on certain children for not speaking English or not, yeah, for the accent and different things. And I would step in those cases, so it wasn't just like an African experience, but I was always, I guess, sensitive and trying to spread like that understanding and stuff amongst people even when I was young. But I don't know where else like I saw that or I got that, but I do want to make it a point to encourage us to expose our children more, to different
Definitely.
cultures. Because if I wasn't maybe intentionally put in different, like in a mix of cultural, experiences or whatever, but I
Mhm.
think that we need to start doing that with our children, especially exposing them to like what's being hidden from us. We don't know much about the continent of Africa, about the many different cultures and and things that on
Have
the
to be
continent.
We definitely have to be intentional about these things. It can't just
Mhm.
be like we expect somebody else to do it.
Exactly.
When and I bring up the Jewish community a lot because they usually don't get any flack for saying I only will use a Jewish lawyer, I only will go to a Jewish
Mm,
doctor, I only will do
mm.
this. Nobody outside, when they say that in public, will condemn them for that. But when black people will even say the same things, we are called reverse racists and all types of things,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
it's condemned when we do it. So we get shamed for
Mm-hmm.
embracing us. So we just have to not be considering what other people will think and say, I don't care what you have to say. I know the real meaning of racism, and it's a power structure in a system. So you calling me reverse racist is you being stupid. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
move on and keep doing what I need to do. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
be intentional about supporting one another, intentional about learning languages, intentional about being open-minded to the experience and questioning what we are being given, right?
Right.
And so those things have to exist. But back on the point of cultural appropriation, I do believe that there is a possibility for Africans in the diaspora to have a colonial mindset based on how we have been educated and trained. However, I want to also put in that there is a long history. I mean, immediately drawing from during the time that we were enslaved to immediately after, where we have embraced Africa and we have a long history of people. And before Garvey, like everybody who is Pan-African kind of knows Garvey and know that story. But that is the 20th century. There is 19th century, 18th century, Black nationalist movements that are happening. And people are, pushing and pursuing that. So we're going to talk about some of those elements today. And I bring that up because I don't believe that it can be called cultural appropriation, because we have been doing this for a long time. It didn't just start with it being a fad or popular now. There are ebbs and flows of how these things come back to the, the surface. They might dip underground, but there's still what we say, a critical mass of people who are always talking about these things. So we're going to highlight in our highlight reel today a good brother, Martin R. Delaney. And he was a journalist, an author, wrote some amazing books, some amazing articles. And here's the thing. We talk about champions, right? And what do I always say that a champion is? A champion is somebody that says it's not just wrong because it's happening to me. It's wrong because it's happening to anybody. Martin Delaney was born free, but was an abolitionist.
Yep.
Born free, meaning he could have just ignored enslavement of all the
could have gone about his happy free life if he wanted to.
But made sure that he stood in the fire and not only just fought for abolition. Martin Delaney is one of the first people credited with saying Africa for the Africans.
African.
Like credited as being the father of Black nationalism, one of the pioneers of Pan-Africanism. So those things right there, just that history. And I'll tell you, just how long ago that was. I say before Garvey, so it's a bit far in history. But Michelee, what can you share with the people about Martin Delaney?
Oh yeah, this brother, man. I mean, of course, with us being Pan-African is, pretty much he just really, just sparked something for me. But I was listening to who is it? Michelee Asante, Dr. Michelee Asante talk about him, and he says something. He called him a transformative, right? People were trying to call him, we're saying after, I guess after he passed, just trying to label him. People like to put people in boxes. What kind of Black person is this or whatever? And people were trying to say he was a separatist or, just a Black nationalist trying to, because some people now use Black nationalist as a slanderous term or something. Yeah, just kind of separate you. But he was talking about how he participated in transformative identity, and really having us reconnect. He showed an interest in Africa when it wasn't popular. You know what I mean? Like before, like you said, he was one of the first people, one of the pioneers of doing this, right? And he would travel, like he traveled to Africa, like scoping out, like, let's see how we can make this work. And one thing about him that I love too, he was just like, because you have folks trying to label him in America, like white folks trying to label him and call him a separatist and all this. And he's like, look, we could make this work if we could get equality. But if we can't, looking at this system and racism, it's not going to work for us. You don't want to treat us fairly. We're going to go, then we can find a solution to where we can prosper outside of this place. And so that was just revolutionary, just to think that I can go somewhere else. If I'm not happy here and this can't work here, I'm trying to find real working solutions for my people. So let me go over here, you know what I mean? And he moved to Canada. He moved his family to Canada for a while. And I feel like it's kind of like me. I feel like we share a lot of the same ideas, because like I don't live in America right now, and I haven't for a few years, and I'm like, I don't, if I'm not happy there, and I'm like, and I feel like I can, the quality of life can be better elsewhere, I can explore that, and I will, try to make ways and find a way for other people, to do that as well. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we want our people to succeed. So yeah, Martin Delaney, he very inspirational. What else? He also, what else?
I
Oh,
mean,
he was one of the first. Mm-hmm. Go
he
ahead.
one of the things that I liked about him and that showed his bravery earlier. So Martin Delaney is born in 1812. So that just gives you a scope of when
The
he was
time.
working, right?
Mm-hmm.
The timeline of when he was active, like the 1820s through the 1870s, right? And so we're talking about a guy who was a medical student. He was like a physician's assistant, and there was a cholera outbreak in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the people were leaving. A lot of the doctors left for fear of contamination, and Martin Delaney
Right.
stayed behind. Again, that champion stayed behind to treat people at the risk of his own health. He's like, look, man, these people need medical assistance, and I'm going to be here to do it. He got accepted to Harvard Medical School
One of the
and
first three Black people. Hmm.
and was kicked out because white students were protesting. Surprise, surprise. And this is like
Right.
1850, right? And so these are the 1850s. He gets into medical school, which means that, and not just medical school, Harvard Medical School, and it still had the name recognition even back then. And it was they accepted him on the merit of his intelligence, of his work, of his abilities. And
Hmm.
he was only kicked out because of bigotry. And so that's
Right.
not a surprise. So we are talking about a person who consistently stood in the face of adversion intentionally, very
Hmm.
intentional about his advocacy. And also, like, once again, born free, Martin Delaney fought in the Union Army, was one of the first people to sign up, was like,
Hmm.
yes, I will fight on behalf of freeing my brothers and sisters. Like, this is unacceptable. I'm an
Right.
abolition. Like, he went from being a medical, like, doctor to being like full on journalist, activist, soldier. Like,
Hmm.
those, those things don't go together. And he didn't have to keep making these changes, but he
But like you
he
said, he
saw.
was a champion though. He was solution oriented.
Mhm, exactly
Hmm.
what we are always promoting, which is why this is very important. And if you're in the comments or if you're watching this right now, just put yes or no. Have you ever heard of Martin Delaney before today? Just
Yeah, let
be
us know if
honest
you ever
and
even
just put
heard.
yes or no if you've heard of Martin Delaney, because I don't think I hadn't heard about him until my early
Into
20s, until I
right.
was a college student who had to major in African American studies. And like we say every day, that information should not be only reserved, first of all, only for college students. Second,
Right.
only for people who major in a specific major about us. We should be
Hmm.
learning about us. Other people should be learning about us because it's a part of our collective history. You were saying
Hmm.
something, Mish.
Oh no, I wasn't
You was
saying anything. I think I was.
oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure, we give access to information about people that we don't necessarily have open access to. Like, we all have Google, right? And people say, "Oh man, this generation has access to all this information." But if you don't know what to Google, how are you
Yeah.
going to find the information? Like, you can say that all day that we have access to the information, but if
Yeah.
you don't
But how
even
do
know
you know
what
what to
information
search?
to look for, right?
But bro, that's why we're doing this work. That's why we have to, create, like, repackage basically. These people are there, the resources are there. We have countless scholars, you know what I mean, like internationally known and admired, appreciated, very knowledgeable people who have written the blueprints. These people have already try different methods and stuff. And these things can work. It's just that now that we're in a different time, we have the advantage of having access to more resources, um,
Exactly.
more opportunities and things. We can get in different positions to actually to change a lot of things using the same tools that they did, using the same platform, I mean the same blueprints. And so I think that's very important for us, and that's why we're trying to do the work of repackaging all this stuff and giving it to us, our people, to advance us. And
Yeah.
so this social activism playbook.
And the other thing with, like you said, the African Social Activism Playbook, we are presenting to ourselves, right? The
Mhm.
plays that have already been laid out, letting
Yep.
ourselves know we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The plays
At
have
all.
already been drawn up by our ancestors, by our legends, the ones that we know of, the ones that we don't. And what we can do with the current technology is we can compile all these things in one place now. We can concurrently study. I don't need the Encyclopedia World Book A to Z anymore, right? I don't need all of those physical copies of those thick books. If I know the
Mhm.
information, because a lot of that, I don't need to know all of the other information in there. I may want to streamline what I want to study. And so
Right.
if I want to study Black nationalism and know that it's not a negative term, or Hotep and know that it's not a negative term, and re-embrace and reclaim these positive terms that we've allowed other people to change our narrative on, we have access to that now. We can talk about
Right.
Ella Baker, Ida B. Wells, Martin Delaney, and also show you the time period and the length of time that we have been in this fight. And the reason that we're
Right.
talking about Martin Delaney today, because I wanted to show our continental African brothers and sisters, and even those of us who are in the diaspora who are, claiming this cultural appropriation, or even those who are in the diaspora who may even kind of understand that terminology because they feel like it's just a fad, to know
Mhm.
that it's not just a fad. People have long been doing this work. We're talking about 1820s, you know what I mean? All the way to the 1880s,
Right.
like Martin Delaney. And then it didn't stop with him. He had compatriots, he had peers who were fighting alongside him. And trust me,
Mhm.
they will be highlighted in other episodes. And we will
Mhm.
reference back to these things because everybody isn't going to see episode 1 of ASAP. Everybody isn't going to
Mhm.
see episode 15. Somebody might come in on episode 300 and be like,
Right.
okay, so they referencing this. Maybe I need to go back to the archive and see what came
Right.
before.
And I think
So
it's
it's
also yeah, I think it's also important. Like, one thing I think about when we're talking about repackaging this and presenting people with the social activism playbook is to let people know where they can fit in the struggle, because like we talk about all the time, we all have a role in this, right? We can't sit back. We're not sitting back waiting on politicians to fix things for us. We're not waiting on people to change their hearts and minds because we already know what it is. We have to be proactive. And I think when we especially highlighting these people who have already basically blazed the path for us, we can figure out where we fit in. Am I more of a Martin Delaney, you know what I mean? Will I be the one that I can go out, and adventure and scope out the area and see how I can build? Am I more of an Ella Baker where I can be more, inspiring and pushing the youth? Can I communicate with other people? Can I be that bridge for our people? You know what I mean? So it's so many different roles, and all of our elders, ancestors have like shown us that we can see how diverse people were. Everybody didn't have the same path. And like we like to point out when we talk about certain people, like between Booker T and
in Du Bois.
Du Bois, yes, we can. it doesn't have to be an either or. When we talk about Martin and
Right.
Malcolm, it doesn't have to be either or. We need
It's
to
not
learn
mutually exclusive.
also. Exactly, because there were mistakes made with people feuding and wasting time, right? They were still moving, but we could have gotten further, so now our role, our responsibility is to also look at what was done and look at how we can improve it. We can build upon it,
Right.
but we don't have to start from scratch. So I think that's very
Exactly.
important for us to pay attention to. We don't have to start from
Yep.
scratch. We can see where we fit in. We can see what role we can take on, or it's just so much. But we are not at all done with this process. We are still working. We have to still work and all be involved.
And there is no end to this process.
At all,
Like,
it's
I
not gonna
always
be.
tell people there's no end. Like, what is the end goal for African Unity Initiative? There is no end goal, because if we do reach all of our goals, we still need maintenance. Like, it's
Right.
just like having a car and saying, oh man, I filled the tank up today. Okay, you filled it up today, but if you're going to keep driving, you're going to have to fill it up every so often when it
Yeah.
gets to E. Or, you just drive, my engine is working, but you don't every 6 months, you don't go get a tune up every 3 months, you don't get an oil change. You are going to ruin that car, even though, it's clean on the outside and fresh on the inside. But if the engine isn't working, it doesn't matter, right? And so a lot of the times we get to a place in our movements where we feel like, okay, we've reached that point where we can just, lay back and chill. And that is where we actually go to, that's when we go into that recession period of feeling like we're starting over every generation. And you mentioned trailblazers. These people have already blazed the trail, right? The trails are there. The thing is, in the time when we start chilling, we let those trails get covered up by kudzu. It's not that we have to build it all the way over again. The trail is still there. We just had to get a machete and cut some of that shrubbery around it,
Yeah.
and to find it again. Just like we're introducing a lot of people to the likes of Martin Delaney's, to the specifics of a Shirley Chisholm, to the works of Ida B. Wells. Not just they were Black first in some book as a footnote in history.
Right.
They actually did work, something to actually be spoken about, something to be cheered, something to be revered. And actually, like I say almost every day, when we know that we have giants upon which to build, it encourages us, because we don't feel like we're the first generation to do it. Because it can be very discouraging if you feel like, oh man, my people have never done anything. So, how could I possibly have the capability of doing it? Right? No, but if oh man, I come from the line of these people who did all of these different types of things. So when I feel like I have a dream to do something that I don't feel like is conventional, maybe it's not impossible. Maybe there's a reason that I have that thought, right? Maybe it came from somewhere. Maybe my ancestors are speaking to me. All of those things, having access to this information, will encourage people to continue to do that work. And if you listen to like the likes of Marcus Garvey, or the likes of a Martin Luther King, or the likes of a Malcolm X, or even Du Bois, they knew aspects of history. They were drawing on inspiration from people who came before them.
Exactly.
And they talk about it, right? If you read their writings or you listen to them talk, like there are recordings of people and they talk about their inspirations. They cite them. Like Martin Luther King was a student at Morehouse, so he knew about Benjamin Banneker. He knew about so many other people that came before him. So he drew on that inspiration to be the person that, most of us know today, but also knowing to cite his, just like at the end of a research paper, there's a bibliography. So that paper, and you like that paper or that book, look in the bibliography and see what sources they cited. It's the same thing with our people. Everybody that that you're encouraged by has been propped up by inspiration of other people who've done great things. And
And
so many more people that you can find in the bibliography of our heroes in their like virtual or ancestral bibliography.
yeah, and I want to also say, like, even when we talk about people, like we highlighted Shirley Chisholm, just before this show, and she was a person, like, what one thing I really appreciated, even she ran for president, right? In the time, knowing that she was interviewed and asked, do you think you really have a chance of winning? People were laughing in her face, telling her you have no chance, but she still got up there and she said that, no, I didn't think that I would win. Like, I know where we at. I'm a realist. But she made it a point to let us know, especially to the younger people, like, we have to be visionaries. We have to see it. Can you imagine? I think about it often. Can you imagine our ancestors fresh out of slavery, fresh out of enslavement, right? Do you think that they could see as far as we come now? Like, could they see where we are now? That's why you see a lot of elders who are crying, in that they weren't even enslaved, but they were crying when they saw President Obama, take office. They didn't think that that was possible at all. They lived through far worse conditions than we have now. We're still experiencing a lot of crazy stuff, but we know that it's not impossible. And I think we can look to these people to see, wow, they were brave. They knew that they were facing the KKK at that time, where it was like they knew they was gonna get off, in the court. Now it's a judicial process, that where we can push more for it. It was a judicial process then, but it was kind of like, didn't nobody really care. But now we're in a position to where it's like they were brave in a time where it's like we couldn't imagine. A lot of times we're always, talking about, man, if I was back then, when we learned about slavery and stuff, man, if I was back then in them times, I would have did this, this, and that. I would have done this. But right now, we are in this time right now. Right? We are in this time. We have things happening to us now. What are you doing? Are you just going to complain? Because what did our ancestors do? What did our elders do? They worked. They were scared. They still had jobs. They still had children. They had other responsibilities, but they worked. We cannot sit here and complain and talk about what a politician ain't going to do for us, and how they don't have faith in the system. They still work. That's how we are able to live the way that we are now. That's why we're not back in, in that same position now, because they still had to press on, even though they didn't see what the future could be. They still had to be visionaries and still had to work. So yeah, y'all, it's pertaining to a lot of things that we're talking about now. So we just gotta be inspired, and I think that is a part of the work that we're doing, is reminding us, showing us the inspiration, of the past and how we can use it now.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to say, like, as far as timeline goes for, people, I always make this joke that people believe that Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass lived in the same time. But Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass were homies. Like, they did. So that's the timeline, people. Like, just in case, somebody doesn't, know, they were both abolitionists. They were both during the time of enslavement. Martin Delany fought in the Union Army. Again, born as a free man. Didn't even have to be concerned with enslavement, actually. And could have just went on his merry way.
They were enslaved. He went down to see how they were living and was like, nah, I have to do more. He had his own interests. He was free to do other things, but he said, no, we're going to make this a priority.
And he wrote books about the realities of the different systems of enslavement, because a lot of people don't realize that enslavement in somewhere like Louisiana was different from Mississippi, was different from Georgia, was different from Maryland, right? And so it was different levels of the brutality, as well as in, Jamaica, and especially depending on the type of crops that people were growing. Like, people were losing limbs if you were, a cane cropper, because you have to process that sugar cane from its raw stick form into the liquid form, and then into the like powder sugar that we actually eat. And all of that stuff, like the the processor of the sugarcane, you will hear stories about people losing hands and people losing arms and people losing legs because that stuff was dangerous, right? And so,
Yeah.
not knowing the history and how brutal those things were, Martin Delany took it upon himself to not only learn, but he wrote a whole book about it, and he wrote a
Mhm.
actual a novel about it. It's called Blake or the Huts of America,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's a book that everybody should read, and I will make sure that I put it in the description and try to link it to, you know, where you can find it. You can find it on Kindle. But
Mhm.
yeah, but it was just very interesting that he went out of his way to not only learn these things, not only advocate, but also, you know, write it down for future generations to know about it and have access to the realities of what was going on in that time, which is very important for us to know. But keeping
Mhm.
on with our theme of the day, and it's just, we talked about Martin Delany today because of that cultural appropriation topic, right? To let people know, home and abroad, that this idea of diasporic unity is not new. It's
Right.
not appropriation because we've always longed for our home. We were stolen. So we
Mhm.
want to come back, right? And so we talk about Liberia. And for those of you who know about Liberia, so there were, like Martin Delany was born free, there were a group of freed Black people in America, and still during the time of, you know, enslavement, it was still happening. It was, you know, still thriving. The Civil War wasn't even thought about, you know, happening yet. So just think
Mhm.
about the timeline. Civil War happens in 1865,
1860.
right? And Martin Delany is born in 1812, already free, right? So there are free
Mhm.
people in the early 1800s. And just think about 1912 and 1965 and how long that time period was. Because sometimes we can't really delineate time when it's not in our like lifetime, decades, or
Mhm.
century. So just think about the difference between 1912 and 1965 and how
Right.
things were different, right? So 1812 and before, his parents were already free. So he was born free. So there are
Mhm.
these groups of people, and just think about the white people who still own enslaved people. They're like, we can't have these free Blacks running around because they're gonna mess up everything. Because these other
Right.
people who
They
are
over here
working for us,
inspiring the people. Yeah, they over
right?
there
They
inspiring
inspire.
the other
Like,
people. So no, we
like,
got to get
yo,
them out of here.
they about to mess everything up. So
Right.
let's. So there was this thing, you know, this group put together to try to figure out, okay, how can we get these freed, you know, Black people back to Africa? But it
Mhm.
wasn't out of the intention of doing anything great. Like Martin Delany was Africa for the Africans out of love, you know, for our people. They were just
Right.
trying to get rid of us. And you know what I mean? And there were some free Black people that was like, nah, my ancestors worked for this land. We have a right to be here, right? I
Yeah.
respect that all day too. I respect that too.
Mhm.
And then there were some people who was like, you know what? I don't feel like dealing with all of this bigotry and this racism. You know what? I'll work with y'all and let us go back to Africa. Now, mind you, a lot of these people were Quakers. Quakers are all right people. They was always
Mhm.
cool. A lot of these
Yeah.
people also were current slave owners who wanted to get rid of the Black people to not encourage their enslaved Africans to want to be free, to have that
Right.
desire. So they end up getting things done, right? And they establish this colony because they thought about it as a colony. They were like, okay, we're gonna colonize this, you know, section of Africa, and this is the time that Africa is currently being colonized by France, Portugal, um, you know, England. So they was like, okay, we'll just make an American colony in Africa and send our Black people over there and still, you know, have a governor and collect taxes and whatever. They're still, you know, American colonists, but they're not in our face. And
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And so, you know, it eventually becomes Liberia.
Mhm.
And there's an interesting history of Liberia because these free Black people, these ex-enslaved or some born free go back to Africa, and they have this American mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And they start to, some of them, treat the people who are already there in Africa
Mm-hmm.
as like second class citizens. And it creates this rift, this conflict
Yep.
between the people who were already there and these new Africans that just came back, from being abroad or, from being captured. And it is interesting because
Mm-hmm.
it goes into that earlier conversation I was talking about with how we as African Americans have to check ourselves and check our own education, our tendency to lean toward our oppressors in a system that we constantly fight against. But in certain aspects, we have passively embraced this mentality in this system and feel like it
For
is the
sure,
way
for
that
sure.
things should be governed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's unavoidable to a certain degree, like, because it's what we literally been raised up in, and if we didn't know any different, we're gonna naturally, like, wherever we're gonna go, we're gonna take that with us, right? It's kind of like when people be like, you could take the boy out the hood, but can't take the hood out the homeboy. It's kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
idea that wherever you're gonna go, you're still gonna have that, like, that mentality or whatever, unless you work on that and intentionally, work to get to uncondition yourself and recondition. And I think, but what I learned also about Delaney was that when he traveled to Liberia, because apparently, like, his one, he had a grandparent that was from Liberia, right? And but he had gone over there, and he had apparently made like a deal with a chief or some chiefs or something there to use, you know like, unused land, to see if they could settle, to make sure that they could uh use that unused land there or whatever. So he already went with the mentality of, I'm not going to come over here and just try to take over your stuff, but, like, let's build a positive relationship, and make sure I'm not stepping on your toes. We're going to bring, whatever knowledge or, what we have, what we can bring over here and create a new system, which is something that we need to do. I'm constantly thinking about, like, how I can contribute whenever I visit somewhere,
Right.
and I plan on living somewhere. I'm like, what can I contribute? I don't want to just go over there and, like, try to take a job up off of somebody, because I'm like, well, I would imagine other
Right.
people would be like, well, I'm here, I've been, I'm working to go to school or this and that, so why wouldn't I get the job? You're going to let somebody come over here just because of their passport and they get the job, and I think he went over there without that mentality, but some people, like you pointed out, some people did, and naturally it started to separate. You get a, like, a first and second class citizen uh separation between people, and of course, naturally it causes some issues. I heard about another guy, what's his name? I think I wrote down his name somewhere. I can't, somebody Taylor. Was it Charles Taylor or something like that? He was
Charles
in
Taylor.
the, yeah, I think he was in the it was somebody, okay. Yeah, Charles Taylor. I did write it down right here. But so when I was because I was trying to revisit, and refresh my memory on, the conflict, the actual conflict, what was going down,
Right.
like when they
Right.
went to war and stuff. And it was just like some beef going down,
Mm-hmm.
where it caused like a really big problem, where it was like um a violent situation after, there was conflict amongst, the people who were there. And they were saying, like, a lot of people that were there, that had come back there, they were like mulatto, and, it was kind of like that whole dynamic of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I can imagine that caused a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much, and like we always say with our highlight reels and our Monday morning quarterbacks, like, the reason that we're doing this is because we want to highlight the work that Martin Delaney did. But on the Monday morning quarterback, it's not always just going to be, a follow-up or something that positively happens. Sometimes you lost the game on Sunday and you have to look back at why did I get sacked and why did I get the ball stolen and why did I get that interception, right? Why did I fumble right there? What was I doing wrong? Liberia, this development in that conflict is one of those Monday morning quarterbacks to like really assess what the mentality was and challenging that, right? And talking about how we need to be intentional about how we view these things. Like she said, Martin Delaney went to Liberia as well, but still in the mindset of being a champion, didn't just go with the colonial mindset, being intentional. So you have champions and you have busters, and both of them can be can present themselves as advocates, but when you actually talk to a person, are you in it just because something is happening to you? Or are you in it for everybody, whether it's happening to you or not? And so I don't associate with busters, but I know that they will come around. Like they'll be around, they'll be at the marches, they'll be in the crowds, they're gonna be in that bandwagon that we talked about earlier when things do become popularized and it does become a fad. What we want to do though is pull that buster out of them and try to turn them into champions.
That's why we need these conversations.
One of my favorite verses is a verse on an Outkast song, Andre 3000 is called Wailing. And he says, even if you don't like me, I'll pray for you later because we might need you in this war. I'm wailing for you traitors, right? Even if you don't like me, I'll dap you up and pray for you later because we might need you in this war. I'm wailing for the traitors. Like we
need the manpower. We need the manpower.
And don't give up on that person. They might be a traitor right now, but it doesn't mean that they can't be saved. It doesn't mean that they can't be convinced and come to the realization that, oh man, I've been on the wrong side. Let me correct myself, right? And we see this happen all the time with people. Like some of the most devout people who were against something, once they change, they become one of the most hard ride or die people for the cause because, that's just in their personality to go, they just extreme. So they was extreme hater and now they extremely love you.
Turn that energy around. Use it in a different way. We got to learn how to recycle that energy. You're going to keep that same energy, but let's get you on the right track, right? You going 90 miles per hour, but you on the road track. Let's kind of steer you over
remember
here.
The first time I heard that verse, I was like, yo, that was so, you know what I mean? Like we do need them.
Yes.
We can't just shoot them away, which is why I say counsel culture and not cancel culture. We can't
say that again. Say that
where
again.
Are we going? Where are we putting these people that we're canceling?
Right.
Where are you going?
They still gonna be here.
If we're not putting them on death row to just, die, they still gonna be around floating. So now they just dead energy. So counsel culture, not cancel culture.
Yes. So this is the thing also, because I tend to have this conversation often. And it's like I've been called different names. I've been called out of my name for bringing up this topic. But like just when we talk about just the relationship between Black men and Black women while we're struggling, fighting this other force. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it. It's like, well, you're being divisive. Like, no, we really have issues. Shirley Chisholm talked about it as she was a politician and her experience as a Black woman. She's like, I know I got a double negative against me, right? I'm Black and I'm a woman. She said that she had more issues just as a woman. It wasn't her Blackness that really got in her way. It was her being a woman. So if we take away racism, we still got another problem that we got to deal with. And so a lot of people, we want to just be gung-ho about this one cause and like, yeah, y'all, come on, let's all jump on this cause. But when we like, okay, let's look out for these other people too. Let's make sure we're not leaving these other people out. And they're like, no, and so you really get to see, are you really a champion? Are you making sure that nobody is oppressed? Do you care if anybody is oppressed, or you just don't want the foot on your neck? You just don't want somebody holding you back, but you don't mind if somebody else is being held back. And so we all have to
Also,
become that champion.
also, are you mad that the foot is on the neck, or do you want it to be your foot on somebody's neck? And that part, you know what I mean? That part. So it's
Yeah,
so much.
woo.
It's so
I don't
much
know if you
in
were in
there.
this class with me. I don't know if you were in this class with me. It was an African American Studies class, and I remember on the first day she brought up a topic. The teacher brought up a topic, and she was like, what was the word? I forgot. It was a vocabulary word or something that she brought up, right? And we started talking about like how sometimes just growing up in that society, right, in an oppressive society, and sometimes the oppressed will start to take on traits of the oppressor. And so as you even, you know what I mean, go on with your life, you can still be an oppressor, even though you don't like the condition that you're in. You can
Because you start
recognize
to
how
value that.
you're, yes,
You
and you
start to
see that
value
as
that as the
power.
model. You model that
Yes,
as the power, the model
yes,
of power, because that's all you
exactly.
know. That's what power
Yes.
is. I just know that I don't have it. So I don't like
Right.
that you have it over me, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
completely against anybody having it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that is how, and that's how, we're going to talk about it later, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
just reference it now. That's how neo-colonialism starts, because
Yeah.
you're not against the power structure. You're against
Yep.
who has the power in the structure. What
Yep.
has to be torn down is the structure, because you
Mm-hmm.
can kill, like we can kill, if white people all move to the moon today, racism would not stop.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Because you can
Because
go to a place where they are no longer there, or like their presence is not there. They left the building, right? You still have other systems in place that were remnants of that system. You have, you know what I mean, like that it's a product of the colonialism that we experience. You have colorism. Where did that come from? Amongst your own people. Where did that
right.
come from? Favoring different features, different, like
Mhm.
that came from somewhere. So if we really want to find a solution, you got to get to the root of it. Don't become that. Find out what the cancer is and get rid of it. Don't just
Right.
try to get comfortable around it.
Yep. And so, it's a lot of work that we have to do. These conversations have to be had. And just
Mm-hmm.
heads up, today's Thursday. Tomorrow, we're doing a part 2 on this cultural appropriation conversation, right? This is a 2-parter. But next week, Michelee just
Mm-hmm.
alluded to it. We're going to have an entire week just about Black men and Black women in the movement, and how, different conflicts that have happened, different
Yep.
support groups that have happened, and just our understanding of one another and our expectations of one another, and how
Mm-hmm.
we need to grow together in
To work
this. We
together.
need one another, right?
Yes.
And so we're definitely going to be harping on that, but we just want to make sure that, just to reiterate what we're talking about today, can Black people be cultural appropriators of African culture? It's mind-blowing. I don't believe that we can be, but I believe that we can be have a colonial mindset when we look at Africa, because we are
Mm-hmm.
not, we passively and, unknowingly embrace a power structure that is oppressive, thinking that the structure isn't wrong, just the people who are in power are wrong,
Yes.
when we
Right.
need to not focus on the people and focus on the principles, focus on
Mm-hmm.
the mentality, focus on the power structure, and
Right.
destroy that. And
Exactly.
so we move on into our deconstructed. And today we're talking about a movie that I know a lot of people have seen and have watched. And so I want to play a small little clip from it. So just watch along with us.
See? That is all. Simple, ghastly arithmetic. You and parchment on a bed.
You imagine the entry may refer to, sir? A master, perhaps?
Give us free. Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct.
So I don't know if you guys were able to see that because it looked like it was freezing on my end, but I could hear the audio. And so we heard Sinke saying, "Give us free, give us free." So we've heard that, time and time again. It's been referenced in music and, all over the place, and everybody remembers that line. So Amistad was this was the name of they call it a schooler. It wasn't like a full slave ship because actually it wasn't the ship that actually took the Africans from the coast of Africa to Cuba. They were already there, and then they got put on another ship called the Amistad, and they were actually being shipped from one part of Cuba to another part of Cuba to be sold and, on the auction blocks. And the interesting thing about the Amistad case is the reason that, so they killed the captors on the ship coming from one part of Cuba to actually a destination that was on another part of the island of Cuba. And they were trying to sail back to, Sierra Leone, and they got interrupted, or they got bombarded by U.S. naval ships. And I think this was 1819. And so the interesting thing about that is enslavement in the countries that it was already happening in was still legal, but the transatlantic slave trade had been delegitimized. Like the Pope or whoever the power structure was, probably the Pope, had said that, okay, the slave trade, taking people from Africa and bringing them to the Western Hemisphere, is no longer something that people can do. And that is that time period where we talk about there were no, when it was legal, we had documentation. We knew where people came from. We had, everybody was documented. This is when the undocumented people who were still being kidnapped and brought over here were still happening. So what happened is Sinke and his compatriots are brought to court to talk about whether or not, they should be charged, or they did anything wrong, and what was ended up, so this case, no. So this is 1839. I'm tripping. So it's 1839, and then the case goes to the Supreme Court in 1841. And they actually, find out, they confirm that, the slave trade is not legal anymore. So actually, they shouldn't have even been brought over here in the first place. And so it was just interesting, the precedents and, the deconstruction of this movie is that the way they presented it is, of course, they had the president of the United States at the time give this long speech about, how he felt about certain things. And they made it seem like the Amistad case was like setting some type of precedent to end enslavement in the United States, when, again, this case is taking place between 1838 and 1841. And we already talk about the Civil War doesn't happen until 1865. So this is a good bit of time before people, now abolitionists exist, right? But it's a good bit of time before people in the US actually start to change their minds and, any type of conflict or the Civil War is about to happen. So the movie presented it as if it was like a catalyst to the Civil War and the ending of the institution of enslavement as a whole, which it wasn't, right?
Right. They
It was
still had a whole lifetime.
right. It was like 2 decades before anything
Right.
like that even became, in the minds of a majority of white people in the Union. So, or even before there was a Union or Confederacy. So what happened here is that the slave trade was illegal, but enslavement was still very much happening. And, those elements in the movie that try to paint this as some type of, oh man, this was the inspiration and it changed the hearts of white people. They didn't care. And it wasn't even a case to even be dealing with. And the question is, how did they even have the precedent in the United States to even judge on the case of this? In this case, how did they even have jurisdiction to judge in this case? Like, these are people who came from Africa and ended up in Cuba. And on their way from Cuba to back to Africa, they get intercepted by some U.S. naval ships. So how does the U.S. Navy even have the ability to bring these people in? We know why. We know what the system of the world was, but it's just to bring into mind these questions, like how they put themselves in the position to give themselves, worldwide international water jurisdiction, which doesn't exist, right? And so just think about it like that. Another thing about, controversial, and you may have heard this, but there's been some information about Cinque after the Amistad event, after he went back to Sierra Leone, that is in question. And it's still in question because I've read many articles from scholars, and some say it can't be, justified or, validated. And some say there's evidence, but some people have been claiming that there's evidence that once Cinque got back to Sierra Leone, he started to participate in the trading of other Africans into the slave trade.
Oh,
Now,
I never heard that.
this.
Yeah, I never heard that.
I heard this about 10 years ago, and I, started looking into it, and then I looked into it again yesterday, trying to get more information, and still just couldn't find anything. But it's just interesting how I don't know where that narrative is coming from. First of all, I want to say I don't know where the narrative is coming from, and I don't know why it's out there, because that element in the air creates that dialogue between, Africans sold African Americans into slavery, which creates another, cause of tension between the African diaspora. So that's one element of what I am concerned about. The second one is, if it was true, what was the mentality there, right? Of you just went through this, you saw that, you saw the horrors, and now you are putting other people in that same condition. So it's just very questionable. So our deconstructed of the movie Amistad is just talking about how the U.S. just felt like they had the jurisdiction to rule over everything, right? Even though
why you let the people go about their business? They didn't fought their way out of that situation. Let them go home.
They didn't kill no U.S. soldiers. These were people that was dealing in Cuba. They had nothing to do with y'all at all.
But that's the mentality they be having, though, is that, they are the rulers of everything and everybody. But shoot, we still dealing with it right now. Like, man,
the world police.
That's why
that little cartoon movie from the creators of South Park, what was it called? America World Police or something like that, where it was like the little toys, and they were talking about how the U.S. feel like they can police the world, and that's the situation that we see a lot. But I just wanted to bring a big question mark to that narrative, because I wasn't gonna come on here and just say, "Oh, Cinque did this."
Right.
I'm not just gonna blatantly tarnish that man's legacy, because he's looked
Mm-hmm.
upon as a hero of
Mm-hmm.
fighting, leading that insurrection and fighting and encouraging the people on that ship with him to fight for their freedom. And you know, some of them got injured, some of them died in the midst of fighting for that, but they were like,
Mm-hmm.
listen, we about to get back home. And then
Right.
to put this narrative in the air that he was a slave trader after he had been through the Middle Passage. Like, he went all the way through the Middle Passage. He came
Yeah.
from the west coast of Africa all the way to Cuba, and to go through that and then turn around and put somebody else through that is just hard for me to fathom that a person could do that, even if they are like not a champion, even if they are like in that buster category that we talked about earlier. It's hard for me to imagine somebody putting somebody else through the Middle Passage after
Yeah.
they've been through it like that.
Right.
So
Right.
I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, that that narrative is out there, and that before you just accept it, question it, question the source that is coming from, and you know, even the articles that are, you know, against it or confirming it, check their sources. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we grew up, Michelee and I went through a program of African American studies that very much emphasized citing your sources, checking your sources, and not passing along invalid information that can't be
Mm-hmm.
validated or whatever. And just, you know, I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. So hopefully the first time that you even heard that was from us, and framed in the way that, you know, we give you information, and not
Yeah.
framed in a way to want to deter you and to tear down people that we have looked upon as heroic in the past. So,
Right.
you know, that's our deconstructed, and our for the culture is, you know, we alluded to it earlier, but neocolonialism. And Michelee, what you know about neocolonialism?
So I'm going to read the definition of it. It's the
Appreciate
use
you.
of It's the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially former dependencies, right? And so we talked about how we can go over, we've experienced, right, this colonialism, and the how jacked up it can be, right? Even for us, but we can go somewhere else and still influence, inflict that same type of harm on other people. And I think when it comes to us as, you know, we, might identify as Pan-Africanist or Black nationalist or, whatever, when we are interested in reconnecting and going back to our ancestral lands, and it can be a dangerous, a slippery slope, because like we talked about, we're going to naturally already, carry those, what we learned with us. It's already going to go with us, going to travel with us, unless we've done the work to get rid of it, to uncondition and recondition ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can run into these issues going somewhere else, and we can have opinions about our knowledge versus, what these people what they don't know, what they don't have, and that can be dangerous, because it can cause conflict. It will, eventually cause conflict amongst people, and that's what, what we saw, like in Liberia,
Mm-hmm.
eventually what happened there. And so we have to make sure to not participate in that. And I spoke briefly about my experience in over the year of return activities in Ghana this past year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I spoke a little bit about the just cultural norms, different things, like, it like petty,
Personal
small
space.
stuff. Yeah, small stuff, exactly, like personal space. And I've seen comments from some of my African American friends and family on, interacting with people of different cultures, who I know from traveling and being in some of these places, like in India, where it's crowded and personal space is not a thing. Where I
Doesn't
am
exist.
now, you can hop in front, and hop right next to somebody in line, like, or at the ATM, you like, dang, give me some space. But we see it as disrespect sometimes, but it's really you know, that's not a thing. It's not seen as like being hostile or disrespectful.
Right.
People staring you down when you go somewhere else, and or you know, when you're around different people of other cultures, and it doesn't mean the same thing. We have to, but that's where that knowledge has to come in. That's what we have to learn. Like, we have to actively try to learn about other cultures, and especially if you're interested in traveling or moving there, like, you know, it's only respectful for you to go there with a little bit of knowledge and then go there willing to learn, willing to compromise.
One of the best things that ever happened to me is the fact that my first foray into Africa was not an English speaking country. And I always say that because when I go in, I don't even have a choice to go in with a elevated mindset, like a superior mindset, because I need them to teach me how to talk. Like when I went to Guinea, not only did I need to know how to learn French, I needed French to learn how to speak Susu. I needed French to learn how to speak Malinke. I needed French to learn how to speak Pular, because when you go into like, and I had the opportunity to not be subject to living in the capital. I lived amongst the people in the rural areas. Like I lived in Guinea, right? And so when you do that, not only do they not speak English because it's not an Anglophone country, they might not speak French.
Yeah.
Like honestly, they may speak French in greetings. They may, you know, say bonjour and understand that, ça va. But you're going to have to know Malinke if you need something, like if you need to go to the well, if you need to, you know, go to the market, if you need anything. So in that point, I was put in the position of a child. Even though I initially came to Guinea, my role there was like a public health facilitator. I was to work with the youth and develop programs, but I couldn't help them before they helped me. So it created this reciprocal exchange of respect. I had to respect their base of knowledge because I needed at least that to even give them my knowledge. I needed to be able to speak to them. I needed to understand the cultural norms. And sometimes like I haven't even I know a lot of, you know, Nigerians and a lot of people from Sierra Leone, and I work with people in Uganda, Sierra Leone, and Ghana, but I enjoy going to Francophone African countries because when you speak French, they don't know where you're from because you don't come with any type of accent, right? Like if you like put your effort into it. So a lot of the people had no idea that I wasn't from there. But when you go to a Anglophone country, they can tell immediately. You know, you don't speak the pidgin English, and you don't speak the English the way that they do.
That's mostly been my experience though. And I had the toughest time in French speaking African countries, you know, because I went there with absolutely no knowledge. Like when I'm telling you, I would have been struggling if I didn't have a sister to connect with in Senegal. I would have been like just out. I would have been lost. Because I mean, I got fussed at by a taxi driver. I'm like, I don't know, what did I do? I don't know. Like, did I not pay you enough? I don't know. What did I do? You know, but I mean, but yeah, my experience moving to Ethiopia though, like my first friends, first friends that I went out to meet, like we just literally just smiled and nodded at each other until we could figure out, like, okay, we're gonna make this work.
Look, my connection with my host family when I first moved to Guinea during training, we lived in Dubreka, and you know they spoke Susu. They didn't really speak French that much. So like some of my closest connections to people was just me sitting beside a family of people where only two people in the family, like my host brother and sister, they were the only ones who spoke French. So they were the ones who were working with me to learn Susu to be able to communicate with my mother and father and the rest of everybody else. But it didn't matter because the attitude that I came with was the fact that I wanted to learn. I came there to embrace. And so I was with them. And even though we couldn't verbally communicate with one another, we would just sit on a log outside in the front yard and just sit next to each other while my host mother, like, she sold fried bananas. And so she would be cooking the fried bananas and cutting them up. And we would just be sitting on the log, and she would pass us some, and then she'll sell some to everybody else. And I swear to God, that sense of connection, I hadn't felt that in so long. Just the presence. We weren't saying a word, and they could understand each other, but nobody was speaking. We were just sitting there in silence with no electricity, just outside, just chilling, just embracing and embracing the comfort of the presence of other people. And I was like, oh, it felt magical. Like,
it's such a beautiful feeling.
That's the attitude that we have to go with. Like, that's the mindset. Like, it's not about I know something and I need to give it to you, or I know more than you. It's about I know some things and I will share them if you ask and as they come across and as they come up. But you know some things and you will share as I ask and as they come up, because I am in your home and I respect it. And I want to be respectful, and I want to know more.
That's deep, because I think about like how you just framed that, how you said, like, we can bring something to their, to their experience, to the culture or whatever, like to help modernize, if to our comfort, so that we can be comfortable. And because nobody is saying like you have to live like how some of our experience was,
right.
You gotta, because we can get down and dirty, we can get to the gritty, experiences. I don't mind. I actually like it, because in a way it humbles me, even. And I went there with the intention. When I travel, I do go with the intention of connecting with people there, and not trying to come over with my American privilege and expecting all my luxuries and this and that, so I can do a bucket bath. Some people like, oh, I don't like bugs. How am I, this and that. And so it's like, it can be hard for people. But even something simple like I had to, oh my God, one of the toughest, well, it wasn't really that hard, but like learning, like washing my clothes by hand. And like, this is the only way I'm about to get my clothes clean. And I'm like, man, and I'm thinking over there, I'm like, oh, what can I use here to make, like, can I help them like come up with a different system? And I was just thinking, because I'm like, I didn't go there with that mindset of like, oh, y'all ain't even got no washing machines over here, and instead of just having an attitude on, well, what you don't have and how you so behind on this, we can go there and actually help. We can contribute new ideas, different things, because that's what I receive from a lot of people saying, a lot of my African friends, who live in Africa, they are like, we welcome you. You can bring a lot of things to us. You have the knowledge. I was just talking to one of my friends today. I was getting his perspective on, how do they feel over there about, he's in Ghana. I was like, how do you all feel? What are the conversations you're having, even related to the Beyonce, Black is King and everything? Right. And they're like, I always get like, welcome home, and like, we want y'all to come over. And that's the message that I get when I talk to people. And so he was just like, it's a lot of things that y'all can bring to us, basically. You have the knowledge of, of how certain systems work. And so we can help. It's a lot that we can do having this experience living elsewhere. But when we come, we can't go with that arrogance and that, well, y'all don't know nothing, and that just won't work.
My most fulfilling experiences in like, it wasn't when I shared with them the education and knowledge that I took from the West and brought to them. And I did that when they asked me about certain things. Some of my most memorable and proudest moments over there of doing things was when, like you said, you had to wash your own clothes. When I washed my clothes with a washboard And like my host brothers and sisters are like, oh man, you know what you're doing? Like you can do this. Like them being impressed by me being able to do what they were doing is what I felt the most proud about. Not me
Yes.
showing them things that I brought from America
Right.
with me.
Right.
And me being able to go to the well, but oh my God, I remember because like I was working on my Malinke and I was working on my comprehension and like my just basic responses, and being able to go to the well by myself, you know, wait in the line and speak to people and greet everybody as I waited was a goal that I had. And I remember the first day I was able to go, not with the person who was there to like look after me and you know, translate for me sometimes, or even with my host sister. I went by myself to the well, had my buckets. Not only did I get the water, that part was easy. That's just physical strength. But being able to communicate, being able to get my spot in line, being able to talk to people, them greet me, them smile, them laugh at something that I said in Malinke, like I'm
it's
telling
so
little
rewarding,
jokes.
right?
I'm like,
It's so rewarding. Yeah.
I just
You feel
did
accomplished.
that. I'm carrying the water, one on my head, one in my hand, and I'm walking to my house like, yo, I'm doing this. I'm here, bro. Like
it
that
feels
was
so rewarding. I'm telling you, it's
way more
nothing like
fulfilling
it.
than me telling them something about the United States or them me doing my actual job that I came over there to do and just telling them stuff that I do this all the time. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I got knowledge. I went to college, whatever.
Right.
But I just did what y'all can do. Like I just showed that I belong, right? And so that was
exactly.
Super dope.
That's that feeling. That's that feeling. Like I can fit in here too. You know what I mean? I felt really accomplished. Like I would learn. My babies in Ethiopia. Oh my God, I loved it so much. They just helped me so much because I did have the privilege of having students around me, and so they, in school they learn English and stuff, and of course you get that experience of people. I think for a lot of us, who move back to different places in Africa or wherever in the world, and people are like, they want you to teach them English, but you're like, no, I want to learn your language. Don't have me speak English all the time. And so I would just have them like just teach me, practice with me. Like I want to be able to go to the grocery store by myself. I want to be able to go and order a smoothie by myself and tell them exactly what I want, and I just feel so accomplished. Even now, I'm taking an Arabic class now. It's been long enough, but I'm, just to refresh and like really just get into it and learn how to be, like you feel accomplished when you like can cross those borders, because we get out of our comfort zones. We can't that's when that colonialism will happen too, and sometimes it can be unintentional, but it's because people are not comfortable with stepping out of what they're already used to. We got to step out of our comfort zones too and understand how to bend, and you can create something beautiful. You can adapt to something that's already beautiful. You're going somewhere and you can be enriched. Like the lessons that I've learned, the experiences that I have, I know that if I'm in a blackout or something, or the water shortage, I can survive now.
I'm good,
I feel
right?
accomplished. I'm good. I ain't got I'm not stressed. So I think those are things that we can learn to appreciate, and we need to, especially talking about building these bridges and and working together. These are things that like it's an exchange. It's not just I can only bring something to you, and you can only take it. We really have to be like go about that intentionally and build like healthy relationships. And even like it starts with us though. It starts with our mentality.
It starts with your intentions. Like, where do you go over there with? What are you trying to accomplish? And again, are you a champion or are you a buster? Like, are you only in it for you to gain something? Do you feel like Africa owes you something? Or do you go over there to receive and to bring? Right? And so that mentality has to be there, and it has to be intentional. And, neocolonialism is also within Africa itself when, we fought for our freedom from the colonizers of France and England and those people. And then you got a black president but they keep the same structure and system that the oppressors had from England or France. Those structures need to be broken as well. And, you know, like we spoke about Zimbabwe last week or early this week, and we want to make sure that those systems aren't in place. And it's going to take a full global African effort, a full Pan-African, a full unified diaspora effort to tear down these structures, because we have to be intentional. We have to know what's going on with one another. We have to care, right? We have to take on these fights as if they are our own, because they are, right?
Yep.
And that's just what we wanted to bring to you guys today. As always, we end the show with the Actualize African Unity. And by doing that, you can be involved with African Unity Initiative. We are on the ground in Sierra Leone, in Uganda, in Guinea, in Haiti, in Peru, in Atlanta, in New York, and in so many other places. If you are interested in us bringing the work that we do, bringing the Neighbor Back to the Hood campaign to our economic development programs, just look us up at www.africanunity.us, because it is about us. And you can find us at African Unity on all platforms. If you put it in the YouTube search bar, at African Unity. If you put it in Instagram, at African Unity, Twitter, Facebook, it all pops up under one handle so that it is easy for everybody, right? And it's on the screen for you now. African with a K, because that's the one that represents all people at home on the continent as well as abroad in the diaspora. And Michelee, let people know where they can find you.
You can find me at Michelee the Maker on social media, and I promise I'm gonna start tweeting this week. I've just I'm sorry, man. I've been trying to detox just a little bit, you know, but I'm gonna start interacting a little bit more, you know, and yeah, I mean, because these conversations need to be had. So I'm just, you know, let me get in there and interact with people. And yeah, any questions y'all have, any, you know, topics, even if y'all have topics or something, you know, to contribute to the conversation, like just get at us on that.
Tweet them, put them in the comment sections, because we are streaming on Facebook, we're streaming on Twitch, and of course, we're trying to build up this YouTube platform. We have so many shows coming out on our YouTube channel to advance and extend the conversation about African unity from so many different perspectives. And we just want you guys to be involved. And as always, we love you. Peace.
Peace.